Hello guys and gals, me Mudahar, and a few days ago I made a video talking about David, and unfortunately this is one of those stories that just completely escalated beyond what I expected. Now we talked about his arrest, we talked about his conviction, but since then quite a lot of information has actually come out, making parsing this one of the more convoluted things that I've kind of done in a while. Now, David is an individual that was charged April 20th, 2026, so literally 5 days ago, and he was charged with first-degree murder and 3 extra circumstances, which in the state of California apparently makes him eligible for a possible death penalty. Now, of course, a body was found all the way back in September 8, 2025, where in the frunk of a Tesla, a tow yard worker had reported a foul odor in a Hollywood tow parking lot. Now, of course, prosecutors actually ended up saying that a murder had occurred back in April 23rd, 2025, 2 days before he actually dropped one of his debut albums. And of course, down the road even further, a few days ago as well, authorities actually gave out some rather disgusting information. David had, and apparently, I quote here, a lot of CSAM material. For anybody that doesn't know what CSAM material is, that is child sexual abuse material, which is a term that is used to describe any material where, a child has absolutely, images, videos, so on and so forth. That kind of stuff exists on people's hard drives, their cell phones, so on and so forth. So I want to kind of talk about exactly what's sort of happening over here. First off, the actual LA County DA says that there is a first-degree murder charge with 3 special circumstances, so lying in wait, murder for financial gain, murdering a witness in an investigation. The actual witness in this case was the person that was murdered, which was Celeste Riva Hernandez. And of course, there is now autopsy information that is out that allows us to see exactly what has kind of happened in this case, or how this has played out. Now, the autopsy report is actually available right over here, and this is a full 26 pages that will give you an idea of how this actual, murder happened. So according to the actual law enforcement agencies, the cause of death was multiple penetrating injuries, manner of death obviously being the homicide, and how the injury occurred was obviously with objects. So they do show in the post-mortem changes, so this is a quick summary, there was 2 penetrating wounds in the torso, so the right abdomen with injury to the liver, and left chest with penetration of underlying intercostal space and cortical disruption of adjacent ribs. Other findings included bilateral dismemberment of upper and lower extremities, multiple additional skin defects. So actually, the dismemberment of upper and lower extremities is something that immediately when I looked at it, I was like, what was it? What did that even mean? So it showed that the upper and lower extremities show full thickness dismemberment. Multiple other skin and soft tissue defects are present without apparent associated internal injuries. The etiology of these defects are not clearly apparent due to severe post-mortem changes, which obviously she was found very, very decomposed in this case, right? Post-mortem toxicology performed on liver tissue shows the presence of a low level of ethanol, which may be due to post-mortem changes or ingestions. So one of the things that they obviously showed when they were describing her body was the tattoo section, which they talked about, she had tattoos. On her right finger, they found the text "shh," which, for anybody that doesn't remember, when we were looking at the internet investigators look at David, they were looking for matching tattoos that Celeste and David had shared, and that was the infamous "shh" tattoo. So of course, you can kind of read through this if you want it. It's very morbid, but basically it's consistent with, what the actual prosecution has said, that she was effectively stabbed to death with, again, that sharp instrument. Now, of course, obviously the dismemberment section over here was important because, as you can imagine, fitting her into the frunk of a Tesla obviously meant that her body had to be chopped up, which, again, adds an extra layer of evil to this entire murder that has happened. Remember, this is a girl that was apparently involved with this person, around the age of 12. So obviously, this is a very, very disgusting situation. It goes obviously, the murder is one aspect of it, but the grooming of a minor who at the time of death, as you can see, was aged at 15. So this girl literally had her whole life in front of her, and this scumbag, allegedly because he wanted to give a shit about his music career and he wanted to have, celebrity status and everything of that nature, he had taken the life of somebody that literally had their, again, it's disgusting because And it's morbid because it's a child at the end of the day, right? Like a 15-year-old kid that, again, may I remind you, had their entire life in front of them. Yeah, so again, right over here, you can see that these fingers were listed as absent on the actual medical examiner report right over here too. So yeah, truly, like, again, this is just to, again, the reason why this obviously exists is clearly to ensure and make a detail of, you know, how the body, as close as what the body can look like, and how to confirm how that body had actually ended up, you know, dying, right? Which is very important when you're trying to deal with a homicide case and establish, you know, again, the timeline and how this had actually happened. Now, of course, the autopsy doesn't actually connect David entirely to the killing. Actually, that link had come from DNA that was found in the bag. And of course, what came out in this entire investigation was that there was actually a wiretap up since 2025, apparently. So this is where, like, the next section of this sort of like investigation kind of leads to. Now, a few days ago, a big thing came out that apparently there was 40 terabytes of total discovery evidence that were sitting around. So this, obviously, for a lot of people that were following this case, they kind of thought that for a second, did he have like 40 terabytes of CSAM material? No, the reality is this is like 40 terabytes of actual, like, you know, investigatory material. So that includes things like, obviously, the body cam, things like various multiple computers, various multiple devices, any device that they could find, and ultimately what came out of digital wiretaps or anything else of that nature. Now, the lead prosecutor said the words, "a significant amount of child pornography was found," including in more than 40 terabytes of evidence from the cell phone, the computer, and again, also the iCloud account. So thankfully, David was a complete and utter idiot when it came to technology, because anybody that's storing what is mentioned over here in the iCloud is basically asking for these companies to eventually report that to law enforcement agencies and give them a pretty clear-cut reason to grab your shit and charge you with, you know, some pretty heinous crimes, which obviously, if they can prove it, very much deserving of it. So ultimately, what kind of came out over here too was that they did run a wiretap on the guy. And I actually just found this out too. They said the wiretap includes body cam footage, DNA trace evidence, and numerous sets of photographs. So of course the defense are finally starting to, like, see this kind of stuff come out towards them. But, you know, when people were asking, bro, why did it take months to arrest this guy when the internet basically kind of already knew? So one important part about this entire situation is obviously a significant amount of CSAM was found, and it was found on the guy's iCloud. Now, one of the things, and this is sort of like a separate note, but one of the things that I have an issue with when I teach people about self-hosting and privacy and keeping themselves safe with encryption is, you know, sometimes I have this, like, you know, internal thought where, am I inadvertently helping somebody out by any chance by showcasing this nonsense to individuals, right? Am I having an issue like where I show people like David how to conceal their tracks, right? David thankfully was stupid enough to take photos allegedly of, you know, CSAM material, and those images could have been backed up to an iCloud. Now, thankfully, David, and it doesn't seem like, you know, he enabled things like advanced data protection or any form of extra encryption, which allowed Apple through the iCloud to be able to flag these images and allow law enforcement agencies. And when law enforcement agencies subpoena your information off of cloud services and those things haven't been encrypted, well, congratulations. They now basically have access to whatever you saved. So in this case, it seems like they're able to pull David's iCloud photos, but beyond the iCloud photos, what would be interesting is David's iMessage, which David probably was texting pretty heavily to, obviously, I would imagine Celeste, but possibly other women out there. And that would also establish more evidence to be used against him. Now, the thing about all of this CSAM, one of the things that has also kind of hit me is, would David have been sharing this with other people? A lot of times when you look at CSAM cases or when you look at, you know, pedophiles on the internet, or allegedly, of course, one of the things that happens is it's not like they go to an online platform and they just, like, share this stuff around, or they go to like or rather they go to an adult website and watch this stuff play out. No, really, you know, I would be interested to see if David was part of any online communities where he was sort of sharing this stuff with other people. A lot of ways that it works is online, you know, predators on the internet will oftentimes talk to other predators and share images of, what usually would be their kids, or I guess the most disgusting term would be the prey that they have captured on. So they'll share images around because ultimately, this kind of stuff is obviously, as you can imagine, one of the most illegal, disgusting black market goods, and people usually just barter and share this stuff around on a lot of dark web forums or just internet forums in general, right? Sometimes these people are thankfully stupid enough to be sharing this on platforms like iCloud, or sharing this stuff through online platforms that are not necessarily encrypted, meaning that the law enforcement agencies can grab that shit and use it against you in a case. So again, the trading aspect of this is not what is being alleged. It's simply the fact that it existed on his actual device. Now, what's interesting about it too is the wiretap, which from my understanding was a California Title III wiretap, which requires a significantly higher legal bar to authorize than a standard search warrant. So whatever was actually tapped in whatever location, that's not being talked about, but clearly law enforcement agencies were looking into David. Now, again, David's stupidity and honestly some of his actions over here allegedly, if they're proven in a court, show that he is thankfully incredibly stupid. And that stupidity is one of the reasons why he's actually getting grabbed. So, of course, ultimately, at the end of the day, one of the things that was super duper important was how this situation sort of connected David and Celeste. Now, I talked about these, I talked about these timelines before, but you have to understand how long they've allegedly known each other. So back in April 5th of 2024, pre-arrest, it seems like Celeste was reported missing for a third final time. And then, of course, in September of 2025, the body was discovered in a front trunk in a Hollywood tow yard. And then, of course, as the days had passed down, David lost his career overnight because how the fuck are you going to perform when you have this cloud hanging over your head? But the prosecution actually wanted to go even further behind this and see, obviously, how much did David know about Celeste? So we looked at, David's histories, and we saw that obviously, Celeste and him were involved in a Discord communication talking. They were on stream together. But in this situation, obviously what the law enforcement agencies have kind of, confirmed, obviously via their criminal complaint, was that, look, back in September of 2023, all the way to September of 2024. So for that year, for that time period, there was continuous abuse because she was available in the same home as David, which is kind of one of the charges they obviously went for, and one of the things that they believe can make them stick. So we saw them sitting together in a live stream where David talks about deleting everything, and in that stream, she was allegedly 13 years of age. So then, of course, David was photographed near Celeste's Lake Elnor home. She was actually photographed there, and this was something that CNN had geolocation verified themselves. So, of course, down the road, what had happened was Celeste was apparently photoed in June 2024 in the Fonda Theater at one of his shows backstage. So, of course, late December 2024, early January comes by, and there's photos of apparently both Celeste and David recovered from a digital camera left at a Hollywood Hills rental home. Then, of course, April 23rd ends up coming by. And, of course, Celeste shows up allegedly here at David's Hollywood Hills home. So that's the last point that she's actually confirmed alive. And, 2 days later, he releases his, album Withered, right? So this is one of those insane timelines, right? These people knew each other, law enforcement agencies are proving it, and ultimately, the end, whether she wanted to come out about their relationship, which would ultimately, really ruin his career, that was something that obviously, according to the prosecution, David was not okay with. Now, remember, obviously, the internet community, within 1 to 2 weeks of identifying who the body was, the internet community found, the matching tattoo that we talked about. They had found that there was apparently music involving Celeste in one of David's unreleased demo tapes. And of course, people had started to look through, obviously, the old Discord screenshots and the various live streams that are up there. Live streams that we can't really grab because David has been banned from those specific platforms. So one of the things that sort of popped up in the story was the Ponzalo lead, which I didn't really talk about back then because I have this sort of rule when it comes to things like Discord, that if I can't access a Discord server and confirm it for myself, it's not something that I feel totally, safe reporting. But however, I think CNN came out and confirmed this independently themselves too, so I'm going to kind of ride on their verification. But to show you what Ponzalo was saying in the alleged Discord server back in August of 2024, he mentioned things like drop the one with the missing girl Celeste, Riva Hernandez, actually giving out the full name of this, girl, unfortunately, who's not with us anymore. So, of course, the further we go down here, obviously in this Discord communication, you see you aren't giving any proofs. That's all I'm going to think. Ponzalo comes with, there's this girl, which he shows, obviously, the missing poster of Celeste Riva Hernandez. Talks about her coming back home in March and then missing again in April. And then, of course, the further you go down, the more people look up over here. I want to tell everyone about how David is a pedo. Did you all know that David likes kids? So yeah, Ponzalo seems like the kind of guy that wanted to sort of be the person that broke the dam on the situation. David wasn't obviously coming into here talking about it, but you can imagine it's a pretty fucked up situation that we've got, right? Like, people have been kind of talking about it months ago, and ultimately this lead, nobody really knows who this Ponzalo character is, but he kind of is the person that's talking about this, and now 7 months later, obviously we are at the situation we're at right now. Now, one thing that came out from like the CNN kind of investigation over here was something that I found really fucking unhinged too. Like, this guy starts talking about like a Japanese sort of mention, which is IT4MI, which was inspired by the Japanese word for pain, for instance, right? So again, take the kanji and I guess Romanize it. So he says back in May over here, and of course they're linking to a music YouTube channel called Mahogany, a part of that manga was an evil version of me. He would commit the crimes that I would have to solve as a detective. I'd be like solving murders that I'm committing myself. So again, a lot of the music that David would write too, like if you look at his discography, kind of almost, when people say separate the art from the artist, it almost feels like the art that he was producing was very reflective of this evil shit that he was doing in reality. So in that case, you really can't get rid of anything in that regard. But yeah, obviously David had come up with a lot of weird shit. He was saying a lot of wild stuff that now people are kind of scrutinizing more and more and more and thinking, wow, maybe the breadcrumb trail could have actually been uncovered, had we looked at this early enough and Celeste was still actually alive. Again, one of the toughest things about these videos is the fact that, ultimately the end, it wasn't just a person that died, it was an innocent little girl that had her whole life in front of her that, she should be able to live, gone out, right? Like, as somebody in my 30s, when I was 15, there was a lot of hope and a lot of like want to see you're growing at that point. You haven't even seen the world for what it is. You're waiting for the world to actually start. And the world really begins once you actually reach adulthood, 18. You can leave your nest. You can go pursue anything that you want. And Celeste never even got that chance. She was enamored by these celebrities. She was enamored by this lifestyle. And unfortunately, the person that she had latched onto allegedly had taken her life. So, of course, one of the important aspects about this story, too, is what had come out with the grand jury testimonies. And, of course, ultimately, the various friends and the managers for David have a lot to actually say about this, too. His testimony proved that management knew enough that they faced grand jury questions about why they weren't reporting this stuff or they came forward with it, because ultimately, at the end, according to the DA, according to the prosecution, they were more focused on his career rather than doing the right thing. Now, one of the guys that has sort of been at the forefront of a lot of this has been Steve Fisher, who I believe I've talked about, in passing as we've covered this case, because ultimately he's a private investigator, and he was somebody that was basically doing a lot of the investigatory work on this case, obviously before it came out that, the law enforcement agencies had this much shit. So Steve Fisher actually had a lot to contribute to the situation, one of them being a digital camera with photos of David and Celeste. So Steve Fisher had found photos that contained, again, these two individuals together, which allows law enforcement agencies to effectively connect these two people together, build that fucking timeline. He found a Build-A-Bear certificate in the home where Fisher tied it to a Hello Kitty pattern, a Hello Kitty shirt, a Hello Kitty paraphernalia that Celeste was connected to. And of course, the Tesla parking timeline, which one of the things that I had to kind of ask about in the story was, being that a Tesla was involved in this situation, I'm wondering if some of the 40 terabytes of content that was sourced could possibly include Tesla dashcam footage, just Tesla Sentry footage. For anybody that doesn't know, Teslas have multiple cameras around them and inside the cabin that allow you to record Sentry footage. So let's say somebody like breaks into your car or somebody like keys your car, you have like camera footage to watch over it. But sometimes what does happen is whenever people sue Tesla, and sometimes it happens for like FSD reasons, like people will sue the company because, you know, they'll say, oh, the car's FSD fucked up. What'll happen is Tesla will, I believe, if they can, basically source the footage of that FSD incident to help disprove their cases. And I'm kind of wondering if LAPD like actually ended up subpoenaing Tesla for footage that could possibly shed more light on what this car was doing around the time Celeste was being dismembered. Like if they have footage that they'll show in courts of this guy stuffing the frunk with a body or various people moving it around as the body was inside the vehicle, that would be kind of interesting to see in this case as well. So look, ultimately the end, there's been so much stuff that has come out regarding David. David is, without a doubt, in my opinion, one of the most disgusting people out there. And of course, it's not the fact that he's just like allegedly this insanely disgusting child predator who went after a 12-year-old at the earliest of the time, but he's also disgusting enough that when he was done with this girl, he wanted to effectively, allegedly murder her and then dismember her. And I guess he cared so little, or whoever cared so little, that he just let her rot in the California suns. So there's a lot of questions that I have about this body was just sort of sitting out there when I guess at any moment, you know, if this guy's talking about detective work, he's probably smart enough, you would think, to know how to at least attempt to dispose a body. Having it sit in the hot sun is going to do nothing but draw more attention eventually, as it did. And with all of the stuff that he was allegedly saving into his iCloud, it makes you wonder where the intellect was. Obviously, it didn't exist, and thankfully in Celeste's case, I mean, she's passed away, but for justice to her and possibly any other woman that was involved in this situation, his negligence, his stupidity led to the prosecution having so much ample evidence that they're willing to make not only an example out of him, but try him with some of the most wild charges in the state of California. Ladies and gentlemen, David is a fucked up, disturbing person. And honestly, just covering this case, like the last few days, so much disturbing information has come out that it's hard for me to pick a strand in this video and focus on it exclusively because it's a lot. It's overload. It really is what it is. Like there's a lot of people looking at this as some true crime stuff. For me, I have seen possibly one of the most disgusting and disturbing criminal cases probably in my lifetime in history. Something that, you know, you can't, like, something that you can't even like make a movie or a true crime show out of, right? Like people that watch this stuff for the thrill of it, you can't get any thrill out of this because just the morbid case details just makes you wonder, like, how the fuck, like, this is happening in reality land. Like, this is what happens in our reality. This is not fiction. This is an actual case that will be recorded and talked about for quite a long time. Not just in the state of California, but probably across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mudahar, and I am out. I'm not even going to ask you to like this video. It's just, wow.